So welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us online. I know there is some attendees that are still joining us with their audio and connecting now. Yeah, so welcome again and thanks for joining us online for this panel discussion and book launch. Brian, Lauren and I are really very pleased to see you here and so many of you joining us today is really great. We organized this event as part of King's Africa Week, and the event is being recorded and it will be shared with everyone in the next few days. The event builds on some discussion, network, and research that we've been able to conduct in the last 2 years, thanks to AHRC, Arts and Humanity Research Council, funded International Research Network grant called Understanding and Supporting Creative Economies in Africa, Education Network and Policy. With the research network, we've been allowed to conduct fieldwork in 3 amazing African cities, Cape Town in South Africa, Lagos in Nigeria, and Nairobi in Kenya, and meet some very interesting and generous colleagues across all of Africa, some of which have contributed to the book we're launching today, and some that you will meet also shortly in the panel. During the fieldwork, we explored a range of ideas and topics, conducted workshops, interviews with practitioners. We've been really lucky to build up a great amount of knowledge and hear voices from different experiences, and many of which are contributing every day to the development of creative economies in Africa. And we are trying to share some of that knowledge and those reflections with you today. And we also use that to compile 2 edited collections, and Brian will talk about them in a minute. And before I pass on the microphone to Brian, I would really like to thank and acknowledge all the support that we received from many colleagues across Africa, from our advisory board, from the practitioners we met in Africa. And I would really like to thank the organizers of King's College Africa Week for supporting this online event. And finally, thank to all the members of the panel for joining us today from all over Africa. We're really, really proud to have you all involved in this book launch. Brian?
Okay, hi everyone, and welcome. As Roberta said, it's great that we can all be here today, and so far the technology is holding up. So I'm Brian Hracs, and in the next few minutes, I'm just going to say a few words about the 2 books. So the book we're launching today is titled Higher Education and Policy for Creative Economies in Africa, and it's the first of 2 edited collections that we have that have emerged from the funded project and research network that Roberta just mentioned. So the book for today contains 8 contributions from a dynamic mix, as you'll find out in a few minutes, of authors, including both academic researchers, but also practitioners who are working across Africa. And the book really has 2 main parts. The first focuses on the role that higher education plays in the development of creative economies. And again, as you'll hear in a few minutes from the authors, the chapters highlight the specificities of different countries such as Ghana, Kenya, Nigeria, and Uganda. But they also explore a range of disciplines and fields, including art, theater studies, fashion, film, and television. Now, the second part of the book looks at the development and implications of the creative and cultural policy and policies with respect to specific institutions. So things like, for example, Nigeria's Council for the Arts and Culture, locations and contexts such as Mahikeng in South Africa, but also specific sectors like craft, and also specific aims or agendas such as trying to provide finance for cultural and creative industries across different areas of Africa. So that's the book we're going to be talking about today, but it's important to mention that we have a second book, which is very much related. It is part 2. And the second book is entitled Spaces and Working Practices for Creative Economies in Africa. So it also features a similar sort of mix of authors, locations, industries, and cases. But in that book, the focus is very much shifting to exploring the dynamics of working, co-working, and clustering within creative economies across Africa. So if all goes well, we expect the book to be published in the spring. So please keep an eye out for further details about the book and also hopefully another launch like this. So now over to Lauren. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Yes, so I'm Laura in England, and I'm just going to quickly run through our schedule for today. So we've got 2 roundtable discussions. The first is going to be chaired by Roberta, which is on higher education for creative economies in Africa. And here we'll have presentations from Agake Mosomi from University of Nairobi, Madanatu Bello from University of Cape Coast, and Gershon Kamara, who is the creative director of Pearl Mediacom Solutions. In the second, that'll be followed by a Q&A, and I'll be chairing the comments for that. So if you do have questions for our panelists, please drop them in the Q&A section or in the chat, and we'll pick them up then. The second roundtable is on policy, and that'll be chaired by Brian with presentations from Professor Juro Oni from the University of Lagos, James and Fiona Drummond from the Northwest University in South Africa, and Victoria Kay and Yemisi Makulu from Hatch Africa. And again, that will be followed by a Q&A and then our final kind of reflections on the session today. In addition to Roberta's comments to say thank you for the support we've received during the fieldwork and in putting on this event, we'd just like to take the opportunity to say that at this time our thoughts are with our colleagues and the wider community in Nigeria in particular, in response to the EndSARS protest movement and to show our support for the community. So without further ado, we'll move into the first session, and I'll be keeping our panelists to time, hopefully, so we can leave the time for your questions at the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Lauren. Thank you very much. Yes, just to add, we will obviously have to moderate the questions, but if any of your questions doesn't get answered live, please drop them in the chat. You can also share your email there, and we will pass on the question to the specific person you wanted to get in touch with. So there is a possibility to follow up offline if we don't manage to get everything answered online. So yeah, my task is to just introduce the first roundtable. We're going to focus on higher education for creative economies in Africa. In the book, we obviously make the argument that higher education has a really, really important role to play in the development of creative economies in Africa. And the panelists here involved are really trying to unpack these in specific contexts, the national context, but also specific fields of higher education. So I'm going to pass the microphone to Agake Mosomi at the University of Nairobi that will talk about higher education for fashion designers in Nairobi. Thank you, Agake.
Hi guys, my name is, just to introduce myself, my name is Agake Mosomi and I'm a lecturer at the University of Nairobi School of the Arts and Design. I'm also a fashion practitioner. I have my own studio, which is where I'm sitting today, and I focus on creating custom-made wedding gowns. So just to quickly go over what we looked at in our chapter, like just basically about higher education in Kenya. Just as an overview, basically the textile and apparel industry obviously holds a very high potential for growth of our economy in Kenya, and also high potential for us to increase our exports. But what's happening is that we have very little production, and most of the researchers who are talking about education, talking about the contribution that we can make towards the economy are looking at us focusing on mass production, but not so much importance on original content creation or fashion design, which is where basically education can help us to sort of grow and can play an important role. So there's been a lot of research, like in the past 5 or 10 years, there's been a lot of research that's focusing on higher education in Kenya and what that can contribute to the growth of the fashion industry. But also what we have, if I just go back a little bit, what has led to us in this, to get to this place in Kenya is that our fashion industry kind of fell when we opened our gates, when trade liberalization basically came through. So now we have a lot of cheap imports from Asia and a lot of secondhand flooding the economy. And I think that's not uncommon in other countries. So especially now with the AGOA Treaty, we don't have a lot of control over the stuff that's coming in. Because of that, like the local has suppressed a lot. And then if you look at also the government's initiatives and their focus, they're looking more at, like in terms of education, they focus more on the STEM subjects. There's a lot of focus on the STEM subjects, very little in the creative sectors. And when it comes to fashion, we're kind of put under manufacturing. So the importance is placed more on the big scale and not really on the small items that, like, how can we improve our training? Then something that we've also found is that in terms of aligning our training and our education to what the industry needs, there's a huge disconnect. So the whatever is being taught is not in line with what is required by the industry. That in part is because the fashion industry changes quickly, and that forces us to look at how then can we change the methods of training that we are using to sort of align with that. So that was one of the key things that we need to look at. And then in terms of what else? Employability, we find that the graduates who are coming out of the institutions are not work ready. So you find that the courses have a lot of good intentions. So if you look at the curriculum, it looks very good, but there isn't a lot of practical experience. So especially when you look at the like institutions of higher education, we're talking about universities, the students have a lot of theoretical knowledge, very little practical knowledge. And that when you go into the industry, obviously is not very helpful because the industry needs people who can actually work. Then another thing is that we don't have a lot of real world experience. So our students don't get to interact with the industry much. There isn't a lot of well-established collaborations. And again, that's something that I've been reading a lot about. And I know it's the same in many other countries in Africa. So you find that we need a curriculum which is more flexible to accommodate the challenges and the rapid changes that are happening in the global industry, because after all, we need to be in line with what's happening. So the importance of also applying apprenticeships, because at the end of the day, no matter how much you teach in school, no matter how much information you provide, we need our graduates to be aware of what's happening out there, and we cannot teach all of that in school. So there needs to be sort of like a transition period where they're taken through an apprenticeship within the industry so that they can be able to become more ready. Now looking just into what the areas where we are weak are technical knowledge. We are very low on that. Entrepreneurship skills, which especially because we don't have big industries established here, entrepreneurship becomes like very important for us in the local industry. Then fashion design, like original design creation, product innovation, and commercial design are some areas where we're weak. Looking at the overview, so when it comes to getting students on board to learn about fashion, we have a range of courses. We have a few courses. Let me not say a range is a stretch. We have a few courses, but many of them are very technical, but technical without actually the capacity to give the practical side. And then we have courses like what we were focusing on in this study, fashion and textile design and management. And here what we're supposed to be doing is to give in-depth knowledge on the principles of design, fashion, and management, and then also to give skills which are necessary to succeed, develop creativity, self-reliance, motivation. And you find that a lot of our courses in Kenya, I don't know if it's the same with other people, are a combination of art and science. So even when you're doing a design course, it's not purely design, there'll be a bit of economics, there'll be chemistry, all that. So it's almost to the detriment of the courses, because then a lot of time is taken away from the core learning that is supposed to be there. So fashion is offered in different types of institutions in Kenya. So we have our universities, obviously. There's about 11 universities offering degree courses in fashion-related disciplines. Then we have private mid-level colleges. Those are mostly found in Nairobi, which is our capital city. When you go outside of the city, there are a few in the central province, which is close to Nairobi. Outside of there aren't any. And those are the ones who kind of provide, like, kind of fill in the gap where the universities are not able to reach. And then we also have the TVETs, which are the technical, industrial, vocational, enterprise training institutions. So those are government institutions, and those are kind of spread out throughout the country, although you'll find again they are mostly concentrated in Nairobi, and there are some in the western region, but then when you go to the more marginalized areas, they are very, very limited. So I can see my time is almost up. In terms of the challenges that we face, there's a lack of facilities, obviously. There's lack of capacity. We don't really have many trainers in this area who are experienced. There's also an inconsistency in the training standards. So we don't really have like a policy which is overreaching, which guides the way that fashion is taught in different institutions. Lastly, there's very little investment. Like, there's no consistent investment in the courses, and that's also an issue. And the effect of that is that you'll find that our fashion enterprises in Kenya are very small. Most hire 6 or less employees. In the medium and large scale, you have less than 2% of all the institutions. So definitely there's need to put effort and energy into our fashion education so that we can be able to enrich the sector and to be able to contribute to the economy in a more visible way. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ogake. Thanks a lot for your points. And we now move to Ghana, and Madina Tubelu is going to talk about theatre and university collaborations.
Thank you very much. I'm Madina Tubelu from the University of Cape Coast Department of Theatre Studies. And actually, I was looking at collaborations for creative arts higher education delivery in Ghana. And I took the University of Cape Coast Department of Theatre Studies as a case study. Also, I reflected on the practices and mode of collaborations in and outside the campuses of University of Cape Coast, Ghana, using the Theatre Studies Department as a case. And I also look at challenges that hinders the such engagements between students and even the academics in the universities and those practitioners in the cultural and creative industries in Ghana. From the data, I realized that academics in the department actually collaborate with practitioners in the field, but on informal level. Informal in the sense that there is no contract, that's formal contract actually defining these collaborations. So it was happening like academics have friends within the CCIs, and as a result, they were collaborating. And such collaborations also were based on students' field trips, and they were also having guest lectureship where practitioners moved from the industry to participate in certain lectures for certain academics within the university setup. And it also came out that collaborators were mostly from individual initiatives, as I indicated earlier on. The department is not actually embarking on creating collaborations with institutions in the CCIs. Individual academics will move into the CCIs to create their own collaborations, while practitioners also come in where necessary to solicit whatever objective or needs that they want with the academics. And I also realized that informed these kind of field trips, the workshops, seminars, guest lectureship, internship. Internship here in the sense that students embark on their own internship, in that the department does not create that avenue. If a student wants to go on an internship on an attachment, the student is obliged to, without necessarily demanding anything from the department. So students are made to move on their own for these internships. And also came out that these form of collaborations played out certain form of power dynamics, especially when it comes to curriculum design, in that policy restrictions caused by conditions from these external bodies like IMF, World Bank, UNESCO, they actually bring certain kind of conditions in that those who are supposed to design these curriculum and implement within the HEIs should have a certain academic expertise or qualifications. So where the practitioner in the field does not fit within this domain, the person will not be allowed to join in the design of the curriculum. And these are somehow hindering free flow of graduates from the universities into the industry, because at times some of the practitioners complain that whatever are taught within the university setup are at variance with whatever is happening within the CCI. So when graduates come in, they are now forced to be reorientated in order for them to fit within the field. And also, I realized that the collaborations were more of short term, in that just after the objectives are being achieved, everything ends. If there is a new collaboration to be instituted, then it means that there is something new that an academic or a practitioner wants to embark on. So after each collaboration, there is an end to it, an end to that. Apart from that, it came out interestingly that these collaborations impacted human resource development. Like there is this exchange of knowledge, whether coded or tacit in any form, especially with the academics. And even for the students, they are able to exchange knowledge as they go on these field trips, as they engage in these seminar and workshops. And also it also aided them when they are going for job placements, because as they go on this internship and attachment, they create links in there. So as they complete their education, they are able to move in there to have some form of job placement within this. And it also came to light that most of the participants were calling for more formal frameworks to actually complement these informal ones, while existing ones also are reviewed and strengthened, because there are a lot of loopholes and shortfalls with attached to these existing informal collaborations. And also participants were advocating for National Accreditation Board, which is the overseer of all higher education in Ghana, and the National Council for Tertiary Education in Ghana to also review policy restrictions and those bureaucratic structures that actually hinders free flow of human resource from the industry into the academic domain, and also academics moving freely into the CCIs. So they are advocating for a review of these policies and restrictions and structures so that it will favor more collaborations, so that academics will be ready to embark on more collaborations with their counterparts within the field. So I think these were some of the major findings that I realized within the. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madinatu. And lastly, Gershom Kimero, who's going to talk about Uganda in the film and television education and sector there. Sorry, Gershom, you need to unmute yourself. Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, everyone, for attending and giving me this opportunity. God's grace and mercy has put many wonderful and great women in my life. They have nurtured me, and here I am with great professors and philosophers discussing the creative economy in Africa, and especially Uganda. I guess some of you are wondering, what do women have to do with launching a book? Well, women have got everything to do in my life. First, my mother, my greatest teacher, taught me how to read the alphabet, write, do the maths. And since then, I've had wonderful women. Even right now, as we're speaking, on this book, I've worked with wonderful women. The one that just introduced me and her team. Even on my previous course, I worked with great women, and I'm still working with other great women going forward, taking forward the research I did, which you'll find in the book. Of course, men have been there too. So to all of you, especially the women and the men who have been in my life, I want to say to you that this is what you have done, and you are here telling the whole world about what the creative economy in Africa is like, especially in Uganda. Your silent support, words of encouragement have led to this, and you are all part of this. Thank you so much, panel, for this opportunity. Now I'll dive into this. I know I don't have enough time, but hopefully I'll have time for questions and answers, and I'll get to that. So to all participants, thank you so much. You have done a great job with this book, and hopefully it will do a lot to change the economy, the creative economy in Africa. The chapter I contributed to in the book is specifically to do with film and television production industry in Uganda, which is also part of the greater creative economy in Africa. You'll find in the book that I did the research into the industry. I talked to major players in the industry. Those are the people who are making films, those who are major broadcasters in TV. I talked to the regulators in the government regulatory bodies who support and look after the industry. Now, I talked to great many people in the industry, those who are pioneers in the industry in Uganda. And when I say industry, I mean the production of films and TV programs. Now, what I found out was that the issue we had, maybe just before I dive into that, I had been one of the practitioners in Uganda for about 10 years. And then I saw a skills gap. That's why I trained in film and television. Now, what I found out is that there are so many young women and men who are doing great work in films, making films and TV programs, but they're lacking quite a number of issues. One is they lack the skills that can enable them to optimize and maximize their potential. And that basically stems from the fact that the industry is still very young. This has been written about. You'll find it also in the book. And unfortunately, we don't have too much academic work done in this specific area of film and television in Uganda. So that's why you have this research that tries to shed light into what the industry is in Uganda. So there's lack of training institutions. Most practitioners are self-taught, but they're doing a lot of work and very good work. Lack of training institutions, and even in the institutions which teach mass media communication, they've got elements of film and TV production, but that is mostly in theory. You find, for example, in one university, students were being taught about film production, and TV, but even the cameras, they would only look at the pictures of a camera on a board. So there's lack of access to equipment. There is limited finances because this industry is very expensive. And also, and this is very important, there are no structures that support the industry in Uganda. Those that are there, that they are not very effective in supporting and looking after the interests of the practitioners. That's the people who are making films. For example, I interviewed some people who are being, instead of being protected by the those supposed to protect them and their work, they were being arrested while trying to distribute the products of their creativity. So lack of policy that supports the industry, that takes care of the particular needs of the industry, that's one of the other major problems. And we do not have established industry structures and that can support the industry. For example, we don't have writers, an association that protects the rights of writers, directors, producers, and the distribution of the creativity is not yet formalized properly. So these, in a nutshell, are some of the challenges that we do have in the Ugandan film and television production industry. Now, what the research found out, and you'll find that in the book, there were recommendations or possible solutions to making the industry thrive, making the industry professional. One of the recommendations were that there should be private partnership arrangements, public-private partnerships, so that resources can be galvanized to help the industry where all the stakeholders have got a benefit in it. And that we do hope, especially in the next chapter of our research, we want to find out whether this is going to work very well. It has worked in the Western world. We don't see a reason why it shouldn't work in Uganda. There is also another possible solution to this is to engage with the developed industries. For example, the Western institutions, just like this forum we are having now. Actually, it's all about understanding our industry, the creative industry in Africa, and also supporting it. So this research comes timely because now we do have an insight on what's happening on ground in Uganda, but actually, apart from Nigeria, most of the African countries have got similar problems and similar challenges. So once we organize ourselves, once we engage these bodies of philosophers, organizations that the Arts and Humanities Research Council, as we are doing today, and as we've been doing before, and then we engage institutions which are having these programs in the Western world, or for example, in this country, we do hope that this should go a long way in fixing the challenges we have in Uganda when it comes to film and television production. So again, like I said, going forward, because now that research in that book that you read, the book we are launching today, will give you.
Thank you, Gershom. I think we need to move to the question and answer, but thank you. I'm sure we can come back to it in a second. Lauren is gonna present maybe 2 or 3 questions out of all the ones that are being posed to share across the panel. We might give preference just to the questions that are a bit more broad rather than the ones that are specific to one paper. And then, as I said, we will answer those afterwards, the ones that are left behind. So Lauren, please.
Yes, so thank you for sending your questions through. We're going to start with a question from Carla, which is a general question regarding the politics of expertise. And she asks, who is more important in the development of creative economy policies or frameworks in Africa? Is it higher education and academics, or consultants and non-academics? Is there one of our panelists in particular who'd like to pick up on this?
Please, Lauren, please ask the question again.
So the question was, who is more important in the development of creative economy policies and frameworks in Africa? Is it higher education and academics, or consultants? So taking it out of the education sector and thinking maybe more kind of private enterprise or non-profit organizations.
I don't think it's a question of who is more important. I think what we are discussing here is a collaboration of all the different areas, the policymakers, the academics, and the practitioners. And when they can all come together to discuss, then that helps the growth of the industry. Thank you.
Thank you. A second question, and this came in at the end from Rachel, is what can the developed economies do to upskill self-trained workforces in Africa without telling them that they're underskilled? So thinking about this sort of international support, or thinking about new ways of framing skills in this area.
Can I answer that? Can I answer that?
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. Like the previous participant, I think we have come to that point where we think that there has to be, because the practitioners need something. The educations have got an opportunity to impart this virgin area of practitioners, and you find that in many, especially many state institutions or governments, also have got an opportunity to join, because this industry specifically is very expensive. So you find that the whole point is, I think, public-private partnerships, I think, can go a long way in fixing this. Yes, the practitioners have got a lot to offer, so one has to be very careful to acknowledge that, but the partnership and collaboration with developed institutions, I think, can go a long way in everybody getting their fair share or achieving their full potential. I don't know if that makes sense.
Thank you, Gershom. Roberta, do we have time for one more, or do we want to move to the next panel?
Yeah,
one
just
more.
one more, yeah.
Okay, this is again a broader question. It's thinking about, in addition to the specific educational programs on fashion, film and TV that have been discussed, whether cultural management and cultural policy and cultural entrepreneurship and sort of broader frameworks around creative and cultural work are also being taught in these universities, or whether it is being kind of very much sector specific. And that's a question from Avril, so thank you for that.
Can I make a submission here?
Does anyone know of any broader kind of?
Yes, I want to make a submission. Within the Ghanaian setup, you realize that emphasis is not placed on cultural management.
Sorry, Madinasi, did you?
Yes, I'm saying that within the Ghanaian setup, we have courses or programs like cultural management, performing arts management, theater management. But it is interesting to note that a lot of the students are not interested in the management aspect or the managerial or marketing aspect of the performing arts or of the arts. They move into the other areas, which are more of the practicals, the directing, the playwriting, and what have you. So at the end of the day, there is a lack or a gap, or how do I put it? A lot of people are not into the area of cultural management, especially within the industry part. So you realize that the mainstream marketing personnel from the mainstream business schools are managing these cultural institutions, and which to some extent affect the managing and the marketing of the arts in Ghana.
Thank you, Madinati. And I'm passing on the microphone to Brian now for the second panel discussion.
Okay, thank you very much, Roberta, and thank you, everyone. So moving on to the second roundtable, and we'll shift the focus a little bit to thinking about policy. I'd like to welcome our first panelist, Professor Oni from University of Lagos in Nigeria. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hracs. My name is Duro Oni, and I'm of the Department of Creative Arts at the University of Lagos. We have a joint paper written by Dr. Cornel Onyekaba, Dr. Hussein Shaibu, and I, and it's titled The Importance of Arts and Culture in Community Development in Nigeria. What the paper attempts to do is to look at the Nigerian cultural policy, specifically the national cultural institutions and also the state cultural institutions. And the paper does examine the role of culture in community development through the activities of the State Council for Arts and Culture, and also the National Council for Arts and Culture. Of course, Nigeria has 36 states. Now, what are the key findings of this paper? We find out that generally, the State Councils for Arts and Culture exist to preserve, to promote, protect, and protect the heritage of the different states, and also, of course, the tourism potentials. Of course, some of those statutory functions include promotions, cultural preservation, talent development, consultancy services, and revenue generation. Although it appears from this summary that the state councils have a general mandate, some of them engage in distinctive programming, plans, and actions that impact on local cultures and development. Now, of course, these councils, some of them have been there from 1970 to the present. And so you have that some of them are very well funded and some are not that well funded because of political considerations. But over the years, the National Council for Arts and Culture has held the National Festival of Arts which has been on since 1970, and they all have different themes. Some of the themes are just the emphasis on a particular year, maybe dance or maybe drama or maybe visual arts. But from 1989, they became a little more ambitious in terms of the themes that drove these festivals. Some talk about culture and national economic recovery, culture and democracy, cultural industries and economic empowerment. However, what we are finding is that apart from attempts by some states to integrate the themes into their presentation materials and the colloquium, the themes often do not drive any long-term agenda and often lose currency at the end of the festival. So this is something that we think that the National Council for Arts and Culture should be able to harness all the resources at their disposal and engage these states so that when they have such laudable themes, that is not something that's just there for the festival, but something that would make some sense post-festival. So to this end, the paper does recommend for a drastic change of the funding models at the various states in such a way that the various councils for arts are adequately funded all year round to enable them to run and maintain their various activities and to aid the creation of a creative economy in their various communities. So essentially that is what our work is about. I don't know how many pages it came to in terms of but the paper does interrogate the cultural policy for Nigeria, a document that has been there for quite some time, and it talks about the different parastatals and the different agencies of culture in Nigeria. They include the commissions for museums, the councils for arts, the Institute for Cultural Orientation, the Orientation Agency, the National Theatre, National Troupe, Tourism, and the rest of them. So essentially that's what work that we have done. And would like to commend you all to try and read part of the work. Thank you, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Yes, of course, everyone knows we only have a few minutes, but the whole idea is to give a quick, as we're doing a quick preview, and we want people to hopefully engage with the book in more depth when they have an opportunity. So I think that's fantastic. Now I'd like to hand over to James and Fiona, please, from Northwest University in South Africa.
Thank you so much, Brian. Hi, everyone. It's lovely to see you all. So I will begin by giving a more general overview, and then I will hand over to my dad to give you some more specific insights. Our chapter tracks the evolution of a cultural and creative industries cluster in the medium-sized town of Mahikeng in the northwest province of South Africa. So we start in the apartheid era, when under grand apartheid planning, Black Africans were removed to what was called a rural homeland, and that was Bophuthatswana. So the capital was then Mabatu Mahikeng, and during this time, the state created a creative cluster, although the language we use and the theories were not yet in existence at the time, which was in the mid-1980s. So this was really a state-led cluster. It was state-funded, and so it was an opportunity that the state saw to legitimize their position as a new African capital in an independent country. So in terms of the types of culture and creative industries that were developed, they were really more cultural institutions, which makes this cluster different to those we find in South Africa in other rural areas like the Eastern Cape, as well as those in Johannesburg, in both the inner city and the suburbs, and the film cluster in Cape Town. So some of the culture and creative institutions that we had here in Mafeking were a TV station, a radio station, recording studios, which were very impressive. It was actually where the Lion King soundtrack was produced once apartheid ended. There was also the University Fine Arts Department, and there was a cultural institution called Mabana, which means Mother of the Children in the local Setswana language here. And they were key in not only teaching people, but also those social objectives and outreach program. And so it was dance, drama, music, and arts and crafts. Of course, then when apartheid came to an end and the government changed, the state funding was no longer available to these cultural institutions. The political agenda had shifted. And so the new ANC government went about dismantling the institutions of apartheid, which unfortunately, in the case of Mahikeng, included these cultural institutions. And so they lost funding, and there were many retrenchments for those who were working in the sector. There was an attempted revival by the private sector in the 2010s when there were certain music festivals which were very successful, and then also a state-led initiative with the Mahikeng Festival more recently. Unfortunately, the private sector has not been able to revive the cultural economy in Mahikeng. And so one of the key findings is that you need to have a combination of the state, the private sector, and the local community to sustain the creative economy and the cluster, especially in rural areas when the cluster is made up of institutions. I'll now pass over to my dad for some more detail.
If you've left me any time. There's just a couple of things I would like to flag. Obviously, I would like you to read the chapter and get the argument in detail. But the university had quite an interesting role. It had a department of fine arts, which trained a lot of painters and sculptors. And they were instrumental in organizing the annual Solplaki Arts Festival, which was held by the university. But there was also a department of communications, there was an academic development center, and a research division of the Institute of Education, which together all pushed desktop publishing and documentary filmmaking, which was designed to support teaching and support research, specifically in the field of rural education and development. And the university was undoubtedly a leader in South Africa in the late 1980s and early 1990s in that field. And because of the political transition, the University of Bophuthatswana became the University of Northwest after 1994 and subsequently merged with Potchefstroom University to become Northwest University as it is now. But budgets were cut and departments didn't survive. And it was a great shame that the university lost, and it has lost the capacity it has, at least on this case, to support the cultural and creative economy. And then the lesson that that holds is that in times of political change and societal transition, you need sustained government support. And we make the point in the conclusion that the creative and cultural economy in South Africa has been ravaged by COVID-19, particularly for people in the performance sector. And you need that support from the state and from the private sector to continue. Otherwise, what happened here with the collapse, unfortunately, might happen in other places. Thanks.
Thank you both very much. Now I'd like to hand over to our third set of panelists. So Yemizi and Victoria joining us from Hatch Africa. Over to you. Thank you.
Sorry, the camera is always on the wrong place on those mobile devices. My name is Victoria and I'm taking this call today from non-sunny Geneva in Switzerland. I'm here with the founder of Hatch, because Hatch Africa is a vertical under an incredible organization called Hatch, started by a visionary and a powerhouse of an entrepreneur who's Yemizi Mokuolu. And it's really been an honor to be able to collaborate with her, with all of you, and with the contributors to this chapter. Just as its core, Hatch is really looking at working with entrepreneurs, pioneers, and innovators to help them sort of hatch, as we say, their amazing ideas, business, and initiatives across the value chain with a specialism on Africa and the creative economy. So the way we looked at this chapter on the complex angle of the financing for cultural and creative industries was to try and let the data speak. So we looked across our network, and though we only focused on a small number of countries and industries, we went to speak to people who've been in the business for sometimes 2 decades or plus, and really look at what are the key sub-themes related to access and disbursement of financing for cultural and creative initiatives, projects and businesses, as well as the whole problematic that surrounds this, which is efficient, anchored in reality business training. Again, across the whole business life cycle, with a specific focus on what does project financing and access to funds really mean. It's been fascinating. And then we looked at this incredible wealth of data, and then we matched it against our own experience of supporting projects and businesses in Africa. And then with the works of people such as UNCTAD and bigger problematic discussed to really see where commonalities emerged and where the gaps were. So thank you so much, Roberta. We finished with over 30,000 words. So I think we could pretty much do 4 or 5 chapters with all of the data we've collected. And it's just been so incredible that we're now really looking at various partnerships to be able to continue the research and dive into the various problematics. The key messages I think Yemisi and I wanted to carry across today from the findings was really the importance of adequate training for businesses. And businesses, to some extent, stakeholders as well, because sometimes the mismatch between the reality faced by projects on the ground and the people handing the money or designing the programs it's like 2 different universes, light years away. And I think it's really important to do this, I said, across the business cycle of a company or a project. And then really looking at semantics. I think sometimes we dive into things that we all take for granted without really looking at what certain words and concepts mean in the various ecosystem that businesses and stakeholders are in. The second one would be the need, as falls on, the need to raise the comprehension of stakeholders about the reality of the business and industry. And then just, looking at probably one of our quotes, and we were very happy not to be edited on that one in the conclusion, which is somehow interventions need to respect the wait for, no green light and ask for forgiveness later attitude of the cultural and creative industries, and how that sometimes clashes with the sort of more slow-paced, risk-averse approach of with various institutions. From then, the importance of financing models, opportunities, and options that are specific to the needs of the very vast creative ecosystem. And that really takes, for us, the involvement of all stakeholders. People need to be interested and involved. And we really feel that with this chapter, we've only really touched the tip of the iceberg. So there's more to be done to really help those businesses truly unlock their potential, and therefore changing policies, creating jobs, and really having a social impact. That's it. I think I've respected timing. Yay.
I think you did. Thank you very much. Okay, I'm going to thank all of the panelists there for their comments and hand it back to Lauren, who's going to kick off the next round of Q&A, please.
Yes, so thank you for dropping your questions in the chat. There's some really great ones coming through. We'll start off with those that are directly related more to the policy aspect. To start with one from Rachel, which is Africa's creative economies thrives on culture and its preservation through education, entertainment and educational dialogue, and food and fashion. Is there an identified market for exporting the African creative products to the developed economies? Gershon, do you want to
Yes,
that?
maybe I could partly answer that. This is my opinion. Such engagements with this body of academicians in trying to understand the African situation, hopefully by understanding what actually that economy is like and what entails with it, hopefully there will be hope and help in designing the policies that inform actually the actual needs of that economy in Africa. And because sometimes it's not easy for the creators in Africa to access the markets over to the Western world. But until you understand the needs and the shortcomings and the challenges, that's when you can, the bodies like this can inform policymakers and institutions in this part of the world to assist, so that at the end of the day, there is a reciprocal benefit for the creative economy in Africa and the Western world. I don't know whether that makes some sense.
Thank you, Jashan. Any other comments on that, or will I move to the next question? Okay, so this one is specifically for Victoria, and perhaps you may see as well. And what would you define as adequate training?
Go for it. If you
Can I pick up on that one? Can you guys hear me? Okay?
Yes.
So adequate training is sustained training. Currently, what happens is that we have piecemeal training where we have development agencies that come in and provide, say, 6 months to a year's worth of intervention in a very specific area that is fit for purpose for their remit, as opposed to the needs of the actual beneficiary. So adequate training is making sure that the training is absolutely bespoke, fit for purpose for the sector, the environment, their value chain, but also is ongoing and is applicable throughout the whole life cycle of their development.
And I think if I may just ask, because I invited some of the contributors to join us today, and I had some who dropped because they're currently being incubated. And I think that was another aspect, is it's sustained, yeah, but again, anchored in reality. Nobody has 10 weeks to go from 8 to 5 in training, unpaid, to develop the businesses in COVID situation where you still have to try and figure out who's going to watch your kids. You still got to bring, you got to make your business alive. So despite the pushing and kicking and fighting, there's still some things which are barriers to entry for people to be adequately supported, because it just doesn't make sense. Sorry, it had to be said, because I would have really wanted those people to be here today and they couldn't.
Thank you. Yes, we did have a comment come through from Irma as well, saying, mentioning sort of with the COVID situation, we know a lot of businesses are either closing now or facing closure, and worry about a vacuum of support potentially opening up for such organisations. I don't know if anyone had any wider reflections that they wanted to give on the kind of the current COVID context, either in relation to what they discussed in their paper, how it potentially exacerbates that, or potential solutions that they see through collaboration. We had a couple of questions about collaboration that came through, so whether that's potentially an area between that higher education and the policy and the non-profit areas that could potentially support that.
Can I just, from our point of view, as soon as COVID lockdown happened, because it's global, we can speak quite widely. The first thing we did was we ensured that our network of businesses were ready for whatever changes were going to come or whatever opportunities. So I would say in response, it's that readiness factor, and then being able to know exactly what your ask is, and exactly what your relationship is with and what you need. So for instance, right now, in terms of investment in the creative and cultural industries, the appetite actually, interestingly enough, people are a little bit more open, only because there's this sense of, we don't know what's happening next. So any opportunity could be the opportunity that might save us, okay? So when people can go towards financing or funders with a really structured, clear narrative as to what they need the money for, how it will be spent and the impact it will make, there's been a higher chance, more so now than there was before COVID, to be listened to and to be able to actually get further along the investment chain than before. But it's very much for me a question of just be ready, just get your house in order and do the lobbying that there's time now to be listened to and to be heard.
Thank you very much. Roberta, how much time do we have left? Enough for maybe
one last question, maybe?
One last question. Okay, we're going to bring it back to the education aspect, and we've got a question from Annette, which was thinking about the sort of the findings that's been published in this research and other upcoming and recent publications. To what extent are the universities able to update their curriculum to ensure that students are gaining insights into local current issues and debates? Perhaps this is one for those of you working in the higher education sector.
Maybe I can comment on this one, but very specifically to our case, I think it would be the same in many African countries, especially when you're talking about the public institutions. It's a very slow machine. So for example, I've been working at our university for now 9 years, and our curriculum has been in the process of update for that whole 9 years. So there's a lot of bureaucracy around it. There's a lot of back and forth. So by the time you're even able to make those changes in the curriculum, you've already moved on to the next thing. So you're still behind. So it's a very, very, very slow machine, especially in public institutions. I think it's easier in public institutions. They have more control over their processes, but for public institutions, very, very slow.
Well, in Nigeria, the university system has been shut down for quite some time. But we do engage with town and gown, as we call it. We expose our students to work that's going on outside of the university. And we bring some of the artists from outside the university also to interact with our students, both in terms of performances, both in terms of also the visual arts and also the other aspects of the arts. So we've had a pretty good relationship with town and gown in terms of the education system for the creative arts in Nigeria.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Lauren. I think it's time we put a close to the event, but I'm really sorry to be the one closing it because it's been such an interesting discussion and lots of interesting questions coming from our attendees. So thank you very much, everyone, for engaging. I will pop in the chat now the link to our project website. If you have comments, you can add them actually to the blog of this event so we can have some more interaction going on through the blog. Or if you have a specific question for the panelists, you can also email the network email and I will forward it to them so you can continue that discussion privately as well if it's of interest to you. And I just wanted to close by saying that for us this was a really a project that opened up a lot of questions and doors. So this book and the one that will come are not set to be said that this is the state of the art of knowledge in Africa and this is what we know and that's been done. Is just really opening up the field. We think there's so much more that can happen both for researchers but also for partnership, international collaborations. So I just want to recognize that this is a little step, you know, a little drop in the ocean is not the big thing. And I know that a lot of the participants here have done research or have posted through the chat other things that they have done to build up this knowledge and these ideas. So again, I'm very much recognizing that there is a lot out there, but there is so much that needs to be done in this research field. And I feel like, again, the network activities is coming to a close, but obviously our website will still be there. And if there is any relevant knowledge that you would like to share with our network through a blog post or through any other format, get in touch because I would definitely happy to be that platform that disseminates further knowledge in this area. So yeah, just closing the event, but hopefully opening up a few more doors for to hear further from you and just keep the conversation going. And I want to just again thank Brian and Lauren as well as all our panelists for bringing this all together. And thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.